The dark calling of the forest, it was spring. The soft breeze carried the scent of flowers and the freshness of a new season. But for Emma and Tom, this feeling was foreign. They had escaped the city to free themselves from the weight of daily life, from the stress that had seeped into their relationship, into their conversations, even into the silences between them. They wanted a break. A weekend in a remote cabin deep in the forest seemed like the perfect plan. The drive took them 3 hours, along winding, lonely roads that climbed higher and higher. The forest grew darker, the tree branches hanging low over the car, as if reluctant to let them pass. When they arrived, everything seemed perfect at first glance. The cabin was small, old, but cozy, and it brought a certain nostalgia. The first 2 nights were filled with peace. They wandered the forest, gathered mushrooms, and searched for the stream Tom had once told her about. In the evenings, they held each other by the fire, wrapped in a silence so different from the city's. They were together, and for a moment it seemed everything would be okay. But on the 3rd night, the atmosphere changed. Tom awoke to find that Emma was no longer beside him. Confused, he looked around the dark room, but she was nowhere to be found. He went to the window and saw her silhouette disappearing into the trees. Quickly, he put on his shoes, threw on his jacket, and went after her. He called her name, but she only answered after a while, when he was already at the edge of the forest. "I couldn't sleep," she said quietly. "I needed some air." Tom escorted her back to the cabin, though he sensed that something was troubling her. Her gaze was empty, as if she weren't fully present. The next night, it happened again. Tom found her outside, her silhouette flickering among the trees. When she saw him, she returned with him, but this time she was silent and unwilling to explain anything. Tom felt something cold and foreign growing between them, something dark and unfamiliar. Emma was distant, as if each glance at the forest was drawing her with a mysterious pull she couldn't or wouldn't explain. By the 5th night, things had only worsened. Tom had been sleeping lightly, his ear attuned to the silence, and when he realized Emma was gone again, he felt a sudden rush of fear. This wasn't just a restless night. It was the fear of something dark, something beyond his control or understanding. He set off into the forest again, going deeper than ever before. After a few minutes, he saw a faint orange light in the distance. It was a campfire, burning in the middle of a small clearing. Tom approached it slowly, feeling a growing unease deep in his heart. On the opposite side of the clearing, Emma sat by the fire. As he came closer, he saw that she was facing away from him and muttering softly to herself. "Emma," he called, but she didn't respond. She simply sat there, her shoulders rocking gently, as if she were dancing or in a strange trance. He moved closer and finally heard what she was saying. She was repeating some strange words, the meaning of which he couldn't grasp. It sounded like a foreign chant, one that wormed into his mind and sent chills down his spine. When he touched her shoulder, she flinched and turned suddenly. Her eyes were blank and black, filled with a darkness that seemed endless. He didn't recognize her. Her gaze was full of something he'd never seen in her before, a deep, inhuman calm. Slowly, she smiled, but there was nothing in her smile that reminded him of Emma. "What's happening?" Tom asked, his voice shaking, but Emma just kept staring blankly, with no sign of recognition. She slowly rose, lowered her head, and turned toward the dark forest, as if she couldn't see him, as if she didn't even sense his presence. Without a word, she walked back among the trees, leaving him standing there alone. Tom hesitated for a moment, then followed her. He called her name more loudly, his own voice echoing back at him in strange reverberations, but Emma kept walking silently, deeper into the forest. He grabbed her arm and tried to stop her, but she pushed him back with surprising strength and continued on. A growing sense of dread warned him that he should stop, that this wasn't right. But she kept moving forward, drawn by something he couldn't even begin to imagine. The clearing grew dark again, and the forest around him was silent, too silent, as if every living thing had ceased to exist. Finally, he lost sight of her, and around him there was only silence. Desperately, he shouted her name, but his only answer was his own hollow echo, empty and lifeless. He felt as if he were wandering in an endless nightmare, trapped in a space between life and something beyond his understanding. The next morning, Tom returned to the cabin alone, his heart heavy with pain. He never found Emma again. Her disappearance was shrouded in mysterious silence, and he knew he would likely never understand what had happened in the forest. For days, he searched desperately, looking for any clue, but the forest gave him nothing. Every trail led him back to the clearing, where only traces of ash remained from the fire, and where Emma's boot lay in the mud, dirty and worn, a haunting reminder of her presence. When he finally returned home, he wasn't sure if his soul had come back with him. Each night since, he lay in the darkness, feeling the weight of guilt and an unclear emptiness. And sometimes in the stillness of the night, he thought he heard a faint whisper, her voice calling his name from the depths of the forest.